Hello again, YouTube land. Today is Monday. It is Veterans Day, 2012. Ouch. And I wanted to share a couple of updates with you. Today is Veterans Day, so of course, me being me, I completely forgot and attempted to go to the post office to mail something, because I'm a genius like that. Sam and I had brunch with his parents yesterday, and I was wished a belated happy birthday. But with everything that's been going on in New York, plus the elections, it's the least of my concerns if my in-laws remember to say happy birthday to me. What else? Sam is back at work, back doing his routine, so he's happy slappy. I, as of late, have been feeling craptastical. A word I think I invented. I know I've been saying it forever. I am a bit behind on the stuff I want to get done around the house, but it's a holiday, and I did go and do several other errands I needed to accomplish, so, I came home, had some food, let myself pass out for 45 minutes on the couch watching the cable. It's amazing how much that improves my mood. But today being Veterans Day, I wanted to share another Robert Fulghum story with you. Again, full disclosure, full disclaimer. This is not my work. I did not write this, edit this, contribute to this. I simply am a fan of his writing who would like to share it with you. It is a little bit long. I apologize. But it's funny. It's related to veterans. Depending on how you look at it, a somewhat sad note to it. But I have a grandfather who served in Korea and two older brothers who served in Afghanistan and or Iraq and or Arlington Cemetery. So it's worth sharing, in my opinion. If you don't want to hear another Robert Fulghum story, now would be the time to stop the playback. Okay, here we go. This is from his book, Uh-Oh. Funerals, American style, are not supposed to be funny. Death must be treated with solemn dignity. Black clothing, best serious face, hushed tones, slow movements. We are patient with the dead. Give the dead priority time. And speak of them with respect and reverence, deserved or not. This is our public protocol of funerals. However, like the careless shape of life itself, funerals often do not work out quite according to plan. As a parish minister involved backstage in more than 200 funerals, I can testify to that. Like weddings, funerals have a soap opera quality that can get out of hand and turn into comic opera worthy of Gilbert and Sullivan. The following funeral story has a credibility problem. As you go along, you may begin to think, I'm making it up. In fact, I'm making it down. As long as I had to change name and location for the usual reasons, it seemed best to reduce the craziness and obscenity to a more believable size. If you think this version is wild, you really should have been there when the real widow hit the fan. A grandson of the deceased set the wheels in motion. The family patriarch had died. The religious mixture in the large family was so varied and volatile, a minister holding neutral ground was required, a clergyman from out of town. Would I come? All the way from Seattle to a small town in Oregon. Since the grandson was, in fact, a member of my church and a friend of mine, I went. The widow of the deceased, grandmother of the clan, was a lapsed Lutheran with a grudge against the local Lutheran minister. Furthermore, her first and truest love had checked out of their engagement to become a Catholic priest, leaving behind in his almost bride a lifelong antagonism for the whole lot of what she referred to as those gooses in the God Squad. The feeling was intensified when she found out her priest had eventually run off with a nun from a parish in St. Paul, Minnesota. If she ever got her hands on Father Olson, she'd tear his heart out the way he had hers. Grandma did not attend church, but she did pray. Pray Father Olson will burn in hell. As you may sense, the widowed grandma was looked upon by the town as a classic character. All the cliches applied. Heart of gold, big bark, but not a bad bite. Oh, a lady at a party, tough as nails in a fight, a little bit set in her ways. Somewhat salty in her language. The man she finally married, William Leftheart Hoggaboom II, now deceased, was in his own way a church-going man, except his church was the local post of the veterans of foreign wars. Within its brotherhood, he was known more informally as Hog Fart Hoggaboom. With the other young men of the town, he'd gone off to fight for liberty in France. The experiences they shared forged a lasting bond. He was a founding member of the local VFW post and spent more time there than he did at home. He rose through the ranks and held all the offices. He marched in parades, attended conventions, and lobbied for them in Washington. As the distance from the Great War increased, the VFW evolved into a private men's club, wherein the old guys gathered to play dominoes, sip a little straight bourbon, smoke cigars, tell lies, and hide out from their wives and jobs. They occasionally hired a stripper from San Francisco to raise their failing blood pressure. Now, Old Lady Hoggaboom had no more use for the VFW than she did for churches and clergymen. She thought her husband had squandered his life at the VFW hall. She was certain most of his buddies were not the war heroes they claimed. Veterans of foreign women is what she called them. So when her husband died, she didn't want the VFW troop involved, or even invited, when it came to the funeral. Now, before we come to the funeral itself, here are some background items you need to know to have a full appreciation of what took place at the cemetery. 1. The VFW had a drum and bugle corps with a rifle drill team. Rifles painted white, helmets chrome-plated. They once may have been a fairly sharp outfit on parade, but they were now old duffers who played off-key and marched out of step. Mostly they liked to fire off their rifles, especially at funerals, their specialty. 2. Hog Hoggaboom was a mean dominoes player and was owed money by most of the guys at the hall. He had a bunch of ready cash in the bank from doing well in the feed business, so he always said, "Pay me the next time a train stops at the station." Since trains hadn't run through the town for 20 years, and the tracks were now torn up as well, the losers were safe. Still, debt is a matter of pride. The VFW owed him something, sometime. Even more than dominoes debts, they owed him for paying for the stripper who came once a year between Thanksgiving and Christmas. 3. As with many couples who've been married a long, long time, the Hoggaboom's marriage was a mix. Love and loathing, respect and fear, tolerance and disgust, triumph and tragedy. Old Lady Hoggaboom, 86, simply wanted to accompany the casket to the cemetery, have it open one last time, to make damn sure he's in it, she said, and have a short service, the less said the better. She also wanted to stay until it was covered in dirt. She was tired of him, tired of herself. She also didn't know how she was going to go on without him. In the end, when the last shovel of earth was packed down, she wept, turned away, and murmured, "I loved him." She's buried beside him now, joined him less than 6 months later. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Number 4. About 50 members of the Hoggaboom clan gathered in the small town that week, hanging around the porch of the grandparents' big old white farmhouse. Doing the relatives dance, making careful, quiet talk, which was unusual, since the Hoggabooms weren't noted for tranquility. All hell usually broke out when they got together, but this was the death of a grandfather. For all of his faults, most of them loved him. So they'd spent a tense week carrying unresolved feelings about their family around as carefully as they might have hot coals. wanting to leave now and stay forever at the same time, wanting time to stand still and life to go on. The VFW sent word via the mayor of the town, asking please to be included, and old lady Hoggaboom pitched a fit that cleared the room. No, sir, they were not coming under any circumstance. No. Period. She wouldn't have it. 6. Well, the VFW decided to hold a wake for Hogg down at the hall the night before the funeral, and hired the stripper one last time in his memory. It was the least they could do. Like I say, they owed him big. Now keep those program notes in mind as we come to Saturday morning, when the funeral procession wound its slow, solemn way out to the burying ground. A long, narrow cemetery on a bluff above a rusty little river. Runty little thing. A grove of trees at one end, freshly dug grave in the middle of rows of worn tombstones, faded canvas tent, plastic grass, folding chairs. 2 funeral directors, one old, one young. The usual. The family gathered, and the coffin was brought up from the hearse, carried by sons and grandsons. The widow got her last look before the lid was sealed and the coffin placed on straps to lower to the earth. Quiet stillness. I opened my Bible to read the inevitable old words out of Ecclesiastes. To everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven. And a time for the veterans of foreign wars. For at that moment there came a blast of bugles and a roll of drums. Out of the trees at the far end of the cemetery marched the entire ambulatory membership of the local post of the VFW in ragged formation. Haphazard guys in haphazard uniforms. Hung over from the night before's wake, but with a fierce look in their eye remembered from going over the top of trenches in France. They owed Hoggaboom, by God. He spent more time with them than his wife and family, and by God, they would pay him their last respects. Or else. They halted. The drill sergeant shouted commands, the rifle team raised their white rifle, and fired. Looking back, I think the sheer shock of the sound of that first volley jarred something loose in the widow's mind. Or it just may have been old lady Hoggaboom noticed the VFW had brought the stripper along with them. She hollered, "No, no, no!" hiked up her dress, and swinging her purse overhead, charged out across the cemetery, calling the VFW names they didn't know women knew. She threatened to do to them what is prohibited by the Geneva Convention. As she stormed down upon them, the ranks of the veterans of war broke as they scrambled for cover off into the trees, leaving rifles, bugles, drums, and flags behind. Total rout. With deliberate dignity, old lady Hoggaboom walked back toward those of us standing dumbfounded at the grave. She was smiling. She had wanted to do that for years. Too bad her husband wasn't alive to see it. "Did you see that?" she shouted as she marched back toward us. "Did you see those old coots run? Chicken-hearted sons of bitches!" Well, the family broke up in laughter at Grandma, themselves, the VFW, and the ludicrous turns this amazing life can take. Then Grandma cried, the family cried, and I've told you what happened after. William Left-Heart Hoggaboom II was laid to rest alongside of his family, some who'd gone before him, and others who'd come behind him. Rest in peace. When old lady Hoggaboom passed away, I wasn't available to conduct the funeral, but I always wondered if the Drum and Bugle Corps showed up for the occasion. I hope they did. Hogfart would have wanted it that way. I share that with you in the spirit of Veterans Day because I think it is a good example of the reality of those who bond in something like war, and an example of how that kind of trial by fire forges a relationship that lasts longer than the test of time.